Imagine this. It's a scorching summer afternoon. You're hot, exhausted, and the only thing standing between you and relief is a single scoop of cold, creamy ice cream. Now that moment, that feeling, it's not new. People have been chasing that exact sensation for over 4,000 years. That's right. Long before Häagen-Dazs, long before soft serve, long before you could walk into a store and pick from 31 flavors, kings, emperors and pharaohs were all obsessed with the same thing you are. Something cold, something sweet, something that made the heat a little more bearable. So today, we're going all the way back, to the very beginning of one of humanity's most beloved obsessions. This is the full, fascinating, stranger-than-fiction history of ice cream. As far back as 550 BCE, the ancient Persians, living in the middle of a desert, engineered massive beehive-shaped stone structures called yakchal, which literally means ice pit. These weren't just storage rooms. They were architectural marvels, built with deep, insulated underground chambers, high domes that pulled hot air upward, and special wind catchers that funneled cool air down into the base. In the middle of the Persian desert, these structures could preserve ice through an entire summer. That's not primitive, that's genius. And the Persians didn't just store ice, they turned it into something pleasurable. During the Achaemenid Empire, Persians enjoyed a refreshing concoction made from rosewater and vermicelli noodles chilled with mountain ice. It was delicate, perfumed, and reserved for royalty. This dessert, called faluda, still exists in Iran today. Think about that. A dish that has survived over 2,000 years. Meanwhile, across the ancient world, other civilizations were catching on to the same idea. Alexander the Great, the man who conquered half the known world, reportedly loved snow flavored with honey and nectar. And Roman Emperor Nero, who ruled from 54 to 86 AD, regularly sent runners into the mountains to bring back snow, which was then flavored with fruits and juices and served at his lavish banquets. Ice wasn't just a luxury back then, it was a status symbol. If you had access to ice in the ancient world, you were powerful, you were elite, you were someone who could literally bend nature to your will. Now, while the Persians and Romans were doing impressive things with ice, something even more significant was happening in China. As early as 200 BC, there are records of a frozen dessert in ancient China made from milk and rice, something that actually resembled a creamy frozen consistency much closer to what we'd recognize as ice cream today. Then, during the Tang dynasty around the 7th to 10th century AD, things got even more interesting. A frozen dessert called sushan, meaning crispy mountain, was developed. It was made from goat's milk curd, melted, strained, and poured into metal molds shaped like mountains. A poet of the time described its texture as somewhere between liquid and solid, melting in the mouth. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And over in India, the Mughal Empire had their own version. In the 16th century, Mughal emperors used relay teams of horsemen to bring ice all the way from the Hindu Kush mountains to Delhi, where it was used to create kulfi, a rich, dense frozen dairy dessert made from condensed milk, flavored with cardamom, saffron, and pistachios. Kulfi is still one of the most beloved desserts on the Indian subcontinent, and it was born from mountains of ice and the ambition of emperors. What's striking is how independently these cultures, Persian, Chinese, Indian, Roman, all arrived at the same conclusion. Cold plus sweet equals extraordinary. Now we jump to Europe, and this is where things get dramatic. The knowledge that salt mixed with ice creates an exothermic reaction, dropping the temperature far below normal freezing, had been familiar to the Arab world since the 13th century. This was the real breakthrough. Because if you could create a temperature cold enough, you could freeze liquid mixtures and create something entirely new. By the early 1600s, Italian chefs were experimenting with this science. The first European ice creams and water ices were likely made in Italy during the early 1600s, and by mid-century, they were a regular feature at royal banquets in Paris, Florence, Naples, and Spain. And then there's the story of Catherine de' Medici, and here's where history gets a little messy. The popular legend says that when this Italian noblewoman married King Henry II of France in 1533, she brought her Italian chefs with her, and those chefs introduced frozen desserts to the French court, essentially gifting Europe ice cream. It's a romantic story. It's been told for centuries. It's also probably not entirely true. Food historians have largely debunked the Catherine de' Medici origin story, tracing it back to the mid-19th century, a case of historical myth-making that grew out of linguistic confusion and romantic storytelling. What we do know is that ice cream was spreading through European aristocracy during this period, and France became one of its greatest champions. By the 1690s, two remarkable recipes emerged almost simultaneously. In Italy, Alberto Latini, working for a powerful cardinal, published a recipe for milk sorbet using milk, sugar, water, and candied fruits. In France, Nicolas Odiguet, who had worked for the chief minister to Louis XIV, published a recipe for ice cream sweetened with sugar and flavored with orange blossom water, including detailed techniques for stirring and scraping the mixture to create an even, creamy texture. That stirring technique. That's the difference between a grainy ice slush and something genuinely smooth and scoopable. That was the moment ice cream, as we actually know it, was born. And there's one more extraordinary footnote from this era. In 1649, according to historical records, the personal chef of King Charles V of England was beheaded allegedly because he broke his sworn oath to never reveal the king's secret ice cream recipe to the public. A man died. Over ice cream. Let that sink in. By the 18th century, ice cream had made its way to the American colonies, and it quickly became a sensation. The first official account of ice cream in the New World comes from a letter written in 1744 by a guest of Maryland's governor. And by 1777, the first advertisement for ice cream appeared in the New York Gazette. But perhaps the most fascinating American ice cream story belongs to the Founding Fathers. Records show that President George Washington spent approximately $200 on ice cream during the summer of 1790 alone, a staggering amount for the time. And Thomas Jefferson? He likely developed his taste for French-style ice cream while serving as a diplomat in Paris, and later wrote out one of only 10 recipes he ever recorded in his lifetime, a French-style vanilla ice cream made rich with egg yolks. The man wrote the Declaration of Independence and a vanilla ice cream recipe. Honestly, one of history's more underrated achievements. Then, in 1813, First Lady Dolly Madison served a magnificent strawberry ice cream at President Madison's second inaugural banquet at the White House, cementing ice cream's status as a symbol of American celebration. Until around 1800, ice cream remained something only the wealthy could access. Then everything changed. Around 1800, insulated ice houses were invented, and in 1851, a Baltimore milk dealer named Jacob Fussell pioneered commercial ice cream manufacturing, creating the first large-scale ice cream production in America. Steam power, mechanical refrigeration, electric motors, all of these transformed ice cream from an elite luxury into something anyone could afford. And then came the inventions that made ice cream truly iconic. In 1874, a Philadelphia pharmacist mixed the first ice cream soda. People went wild for it. But some religious communities considered it scandalously indulgent for a sundae. So ice cream vendors made a simple adjustment. They left out the fizzy soda water. The result was the ice cream sundae, and the name was eventually changed to Sunday to remove any connection with the Sabbath. And then, the cone. At the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, a Syrian vendor named Ernest Hamwi was selling waffle-like pastries called zalabias next to an ice cream stand. When the ice cream vendor ran out of dishes, Hamwi quickly rolled one of his waffles into a cone shape and handed it over. The cone cooled within seconds. The ice cream vendor filled it, and the customers loved it. Whether Hamwi truly invented it or simply popularized it remains debated by historians. The fair likely launched the ice cream cone across the United States, even if the idea had technically existed in some form before. But that moment, a hot summer day, a quick improvisation, 20 million fair visitors changed how the world ate ice cream forever. The 20th century turned ice cream into a global institution. During World War II, ice cream became an edible morale symbol. Each branch of the US military competed to serve ice cream to its troops, and in 1945, the first floating ice cream parlor was built for sailors in the Western Pacific. When the war ended and rationing was lifted, Americans consumed over 20 quarts of ice cream per person in 1946. 20 quarts per person in a single year. From there, the story becomes one of constant reinvention. Soft serve, gelato, frozen yogurt, nitrogen ice cream, vegan scoops, salted caramel, matcha, black sesame, and flavor combinations that would have baffled a 17th century Italian chef, but somehow make perfect sense today.